Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome. Good evening. It is my pleasure to welcome you all here today. It is my personal honor to introduce our speaker this evening, especially because speaking of embracing family legacy, I have the honor of being the daughter of our speaker this evening. Can you hear me? No. I don't know what happened.
All right, no mind.
Is that better?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm going to introduce her by reading her bio. Naila Muid, aka Nubia, is the owner of Divine Variations, which spans 3 industries: education, arts and culture, and retail. Naila is an inspirational speaker, entrepreneur, author, consultant, coach, and poet whose works revolve around principles of psychology, spirituality, and creative expression. Her work is soul-stirring and connects audiences to a deeper sense of purpose. She has traveled to 6 continents, and she has been a featured speaker, author, and artist across Los Angeles, Las Vegas, San Diego, Seattle, and New York. She has performed in Paris, Sydney, Dubai, and Egypt. As Divine Variations, Naila has developed and facilitated the Manifesting Impact and Healing Through Writing workshops and the Building Bridges program, produced the Rhythm of the Heart and Agape Poetry Jam. She has created a board game and published 3 books. She is currently developing a workbook for the new paradigm for education. She services on consulting teams, servicing clients ranging from the Getty Museum, LA Philharmonic, Glendale Library Arts and Culture, the City of Pasadena, to local community organizations and colleges. Naila is available for coaching, consulting, and engagements, and can be reached at divinevariations@gmail.com. Without further ado, Naila Muid. All right. Can I be honest with you all?
Yes.
Can I tell you the truth, though?
Always.
Like, your support for me doesn't depend on what I may or may not say next. Like, your love for me doesn't depend on how many Instagram clicks I get. Can I shed my skin?
Yes.
Can I lay naked as though life is present within? I feel as though I have to speak a certain way in order for people to enjoy what I say. Or that I have to belabor the struggle in order to prove that I am down with my sisters, brothers, fathers, and mothers. If I don't speak loud, hard, or fast, is life enough? Or must I shuffle for some applause? Can I be honest with you?
Yes.
Thank you. I see some of you thinking about it. Like, maybe, what you gonna hit me with? What's the honest thing about to come with? Right. So good evening, everybody. As my lovely daughter stated, my name is Naila. Depending on where you meet me, my name is Nubia. And so, I have the pleasure of walking us through a conversation this evening about embracing family legacy and breaking generational curses.
And so before we get into that conversation real deep, I just want to lay out the format of the conversation, the intention of the conversation, and some assumptions that I'll be operating from in order to have the conversation. And so the format, I operate as a griot. How many people out there know what a griot is? A few people, I see a few hands, right? So for those who might not be familiar with the word, right? In a lot of African traditions, there is the storyteller who holds the keys of the history. And it's often an oral history, right? And so it is told in often creative ways. And so I hold that role in my community, where I am a poetic storyteller, if you will. And my daughter is a vocal storyteller. She sings, she does songwriting, all those wonderful things. That's part of our family legacy. And so I'll be operating as that griot tonight. I'll be doing different poetic storytellings, then I'll be just having a conversation with you. I'll be asking some questions. And this is gonna be a give and receive, call and response at times. And so I already know we got a live audience tonight because y'all was with me right there, right? You're like, yeah, let's get to it. And so that's really what the format is, giving and receiving. And then the intention for the evening is really to take a look at who we say we are, to take a look at what is some of the legacy that we're walking in that we may not be standing up in currently all the way, right? It's to take a look at how we are community members, community leaders, service providers, heads of families, and we all deserve and are called to heal so that we can stand up taller for those who are depending on us, for those who are put into our charge, right? And so the intention for this evening is to really begin to take a look at some different things in our lives. Now, I'm not going to be calling you to say, what's going on in your life? It's not a therapy session, right? It's not individual. I would never do that in a public setting, right? But I'm going to use my life story as a way to spur that thought in you and to encourage you to go deeper in your own personal time, to take a look at, to do some assessment, if you will, to do some forgiveness, if you will, to do some acceptance and some contribution, right? And a little bit later, I have some handouts I'm going to pass out. And so some of the assumptions, let me tell you a little bit about some of these assumptions that I'll be operating on. Just so you know in advance some of my thoughts. And so, one is really being able to get tools that you can use in your personal and professional life, right? So it's not just about having a conversation. This is about being able to look at these tools that you can then go and use, right, to apply to your life. And there's an assumption that no matter what relationship you currently have with your family, whether it's a good relationship and you speak to your family, or you never want to see your family again, no matter where you fall in between them, they have played a role in your life. Right? They play a role in who you are, in how you walk, how you interact, and how you relate with other people. Right? And so we want to begin taking a deeper look at that. And is the mic going in and out, or is it just me?
It's fine.
Okay, it's good? Okay. So, another assumption that we're looking at is that no matter where we are in our transformational journey, no matter where we are in our self-realization, we all have a greater capacity to expand, right? And let's just think of life from 0 to 360, okay? And along that continuum, we keep going around and around. And we find ourselves back at the beginning when we've completed a certain journey or a certain cycle, right? And so there are different things that we get to look at with each time that we complete that circle and that journey. And so I invite you to go deeper. No matter how much work you've done, go deeper. Another assumption, the earth is a schoolyard. We come here as souls to realize who we are, to lighten up, if you will, to expand and evolve in consciousness. And in that process, we come in to often a lot of different things that are going to challenge us in this schoolyard called Earth. And so we're here to grow, to learn, to expand. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. And other times, it's very pleasant, right? And so I challenge us to really begin looking at what's coming up. And another assumption, the last assumption, there are rules that govern life, right? Some people call them universal laws. Some people call them principles on which life is resting. But there are definite rules that you can see. And one of them that we're going to look at is mentalism, that everything comes from thought. There's nothing that is existing right here that wasn't a thought before it was actualized. Not one thing. So everything is thought. And then the next one we're going to be looking at is the law of consequence. Cause and effect, if you will. For every cause, there is an effect. If there's an effect, there is a cause for that effect. And so we're going to begin looking deeper at some of those causes that are fruiting our garden of our life, if you will. So before I go on, any questions about any of those assumptions that we're going to be looking at today? No? Cool. All right. And my daughter, Malika, she is going to be going around with the microphone when somebody has questions. Right? So if you have a question, you just raise your hand and she'll bring the mic over to you. She's so wonderful like that. Everybody give her a hand. Thank you, love. And I'm going to ask you to pass these papers out in just a moment as well, if you will. Adriana might want to help you. All right. So, jumping into the conversation now. All right? Let's spend some time reflecting. And I'm going to ask you a question that after I do some poetic storytelling, I'm going to invite different people to give their answers for this question. All right, so this first question. What were the key failures of the civil rights movement? A lot of people are like, oh, it was a failure? Wait a minute, what you mean? What were the key failures of the civil rights movement? All right? And so I'm going to do some poetic storytelling first while you ponder that, if you will. I am created by excellence, for excellence. I am called to excellence. I know excellence. I am excellence. Yet I have been supping at the teat of mediocrity, filling up on creative hypocrisy, being fed bulls and emptiness, becoming obese through a diet with no nutrients, eating that is useless, empty, starving to death. So why do I continue to sit? Remain in a place that assumes and assures death, a place that contains no common sense, a place that demands full allegiance to my unfulfillment, and furthermore, offers no deference. And yet, at this table, I sit. My deliverance is through excellence, yet I sup at the teat of mediocrity for a chance at social relevance, a chance to be seen as worthy, a chance for misguided glory, a chance to share a false story, Lordy, supping at the teat of mediocrity is a full-time endeavor, demanding my attention on increasing my mentions, instigating likes and begging for friends. And all the while, excellence waits within. Shall we listen? As a new day begins, I am invited and offered, once again, the opportunity to know myself, to dine on treasures untold, to behold the glory, to behold true glory from within. Saffron-filled moments blessing my existence, luxurious feasts of excellence, and yet I sup at the teat of mediocrity. I wrote that piece from the perspective of what is seen as the Black community. You know, we have a lot of conversations out there on Black excellence, you know, but when there's a common conversation in the media, it's often one of mediocrity, if not poverty. And it's really time for us to think differently and have a conversation about that excellence. And so, let me come back to that question I asked a few minutes ago. What was the civil rights failures, right? What were the movement's failures, if you will? And so, I got some ideas on here, and I'm gonna leave those until after I hear from some of y'all. Because I don't hold myself to be an expert over anything except myself, right? So just by a show of hands, who has some things to share on this topic, on the failures of the civil rights movement? And so we're gonna go 1 in the beret, 2 in the Nipsey, 3 in the lots right here, 4 in the back. You say your name if you as you speak, and then we're gonna go 5, 6. All right? So who remembers their numbers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right.
Hi, I'm Megan. One of the failures I kind of speak on a lot, and I think is still an issue till this day, is I feel like a lot of us Black people really don't believe in our superiority. Because inside, I feel like a lot of us always have and still feel inferior. From the psychological slavery that white men has embedded in us, since they took us from the homeland. I feel like we never really deserved our freedoms that we always claimed that we wanted. And we allowed a lot of the sacrifices that past kings and queens to put fear in us rather than elevate us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Megan. Thank you, Megan. Yeah, give it up. Give it up. Give it up. It's funny, that was juicy. You touched on a lot there. And you said our superiority. So that superiority versus inferiority conversation is deep. And I just planted this seed of even stepping beyond that conversation into just sovereignty. You know, where nobody has to be superior or inferior, but we all know our sovereignty, if you will. You know what I mean? But definitely, where a lot of people, when you're talking about Black history, want to start at the creation of the United States. And it's like, what? Like, you're missing like many errors before that young conversation starts. So thank you for that, Megan. Nipsey.
Okay. Let's see. Can you hear me? It's not.
Is the light green?
There it is. Now it's on. Thank you. I got this. Yes. R.I.P. My name is Colin, and to answer your question, or to at least give my thoughts on your question, I personally think that it was integration. That's what fucked it all up. To keep it that way. If we would have done separate but equal, and actually things were actually equal, and we kept everything in our community and kept everything going and thriving, we would have been millionaires. You know, we was already doing it with Black Wall Street. So it was already happening, but some people didn't like what they saw. Therefore, they did what they did. As you may know, some of you may, I don't know. I'm not gonna assume, but that's my thoughts about it, is the integration.
Yes, thank you. Was it Colin? Yes, thank you. And so, I'm going to speak on that a little bit after everybody shares, but completely that idea of integration, which was a false integration, it was not a true integration. Had it been a true integration, if you will, the fruits would have been different. You know, so definitely integration is, as it was called, one of the key failures for sure. All right.
So I'm glad. My name is Brian. I'm so glad that Colin brought that up. So yes, absolutely. Our failures during that era were, one, the pursuit of integration, because with Plessy versus Ferguson, we were given an opportunity to either fight for equality or integration because it was settled for equal, and we refused to fight for equality. And unfortunately, most of the leaders realized that far too late. It was also our insistence on passivity. It was also, I would say, some of the key allyships that we engaged in.
Definitely. Okay. Go ahead. Give him some love. Say your name for me. Okay. Yeah, I love this. Everybody saying a mouthful. You know what I mean? That idea of equality. And nowadays you'll hear a lot of equity, right? And really seeking equity, which is really putting into practice systems that realize our equality, if you will. And so we'll speak on that in a moment as well.
Hello everyone, I'm Kubrat. Love what everyone has said so far. I just wanted to put that out there.
Say your name again.
Kubrat, yes. For me, I would definitely have to say systems to keep it going, like, mechanisms or some sort of organization within households or schools or something to kind of keep the core of what the movement was about going, despite being dismantled. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of where my headspace is at, just something to kind of keep it pushing forward, trying to think of like all the ways that it could have fell down or broke down and trying to come up with ways to combat that, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. Definitely, we talk about systems. Systems and institutions, if you will. And I think I saw your hand earlier. Do you want to, yes, right here, the lovely, wonderful, right behind you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Uganis, and I would say Dr. King got it before he was assassinated. He said he felt like he was integrating his people into a burning house. Initially, the March on Washington was supposed to be the Jobs for March and Equality, for Jobs and Equality. And in order to pacify the movement, the Kennedys and the powers that be had us focus more on integration and equality. Knowing what the aftermath of that would be, which was the complete decimation of Black economics within the Black community. So had we focused more on equity, more than integration, and also building our own instead of integrating into something that never wanted us there, still does not want us there. And I often think about a brilliant quote from Toni Morrison when she said, racism is just a distraction. Every time we think about moving forward on our own path, we're told, well, you're not as good in ballet as this one, or you'll never be a great piano player. So while we're focusing on being as good as our white counterparts, they are excelling ahead of us in things that they have been able to acquire through generational wealth. So instead of us saying, focus on our own shit, stay over here, mind your business, we have to be as good as this one. We have to be as good as the Asians in math. We have to be as good as the white people in their churches. So if we can focus on our own instead of being distracted by the call to constantly compete in systems that were not and will never be built for us, we would have been so much further along at this point.
Yes, thank you. And so just to touch briefly on a few things and pick out from the juicy garden that you laid out for us. Identity, who we say we are, I heard you speaking about, right? Who are we? And a focus. What are we focused on, right? And then going to somebody else and asking someone else for permission. We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Hi everybody, I'm Janelle Ponte. Thank you so much for doing this. I believe one of the biggest mistakes of the civil rights movement was our people allowing our oppressors to educate us. The school systems, I grew up in an all-black city, and while there was a lot of beauty, Gary, Indiana, because we allowed our oppressors to tell us who we were, which was often, these are government-run schools. I really believe that was one of the biggest roots of black-on-black crime, because we were taught to hate what we saw, and all we saw was each other, and we didn't think it was good, we didn't think it was beautiful. So I really believe it was the allowing of the school systems to tell us who we were, but not. It was a lie.
And just to speak briefly on what some of the things you said, that education, so key. It's like, and the root word of education, educare, is to draw out, right? But the modern education, we're going to talk about it in a minute. Let me just pause. But yes, education. And going to the oppressor, going to someone else for permission again, and to tell you who you are and what you can have, right? Woo! In a minute. Yes.
So many issues with the civil rights movement. I agree with. I was going to say a little piece of what everybody said. I totally agree with everything. But to add a little, to expand on something that you touched on, I think it still applies today, like the piece where we're asking for rights. Like, if we get back to our indigenous practices and beliefs of who we are, what we are, and our connection to nature and to source, we're having a human experience as spirit bodies, you know what I'm saying? So we have a direct connection to the Most High. So why am I asking man to free me? And if I'm asking man to free me, I'm asking him, he can also enslave me, and it's up to him. So why am I putting that on man? Like, the whole approach is skewed. It's like, fight for this right. We're still fighting for the same rights as we were in the civil rights movement. And where has it gotten us? Like, we're going backwards. If we embody a consciousness where we're like, you know what? We know who we are, education. We accept it. We embrace it. Fuck your rights.
To put it
We're not asking you for anything. And, knowing who we are, I think it's not asking man, giving man the power to tell us who we are, to define us. Soul is my name.
Soul. Yes. Give it up for soul. And so, before I jump in deeper, if you will, because y'all laid it out. I'm going to jump in deeper. I'm going to do some poetic storytelling. Oh, okay. Before I do that, if you could, Prentice, come on up here. Come get the mic. Come get the mic. Where's the mic? Pass the mic to Prentice, if you will, while you do that. Perfect. There you go. Yeah, take that seat. That's perfect. That's your seat.
As I scanned the room, guesstimate the ages of people that I see. And what the definition of actually civil rights movement was. As a teenager, it might have been joining Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver and some of the Black Panthers who were pushing a number of programs, but their biggest fight was pushing Mao Zedong and communism. But simultaneously, you had Maulana Karenga and Mahmoud Baraka and others who were pushing Black nationalism from a Pan-African. Then you had Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, who was focused in on the students, Black students who were in college in the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. Martin Luther King, amongst a lot of people, was not the biggie. There were all these different people as part of this movement. Even when Angela Davis left UCSD, went to UCLA, and there was a clash between the Nation of Islam and the Black Panther Party. We still had to look at what each of those different organizations was advocating for or pushing as their agenda. So I felt like the one fundamental thing that if you tried to characterize the civil rights movement, not so much in how people, what was going on in the country and everything, but what each, as people jumped from organization I know I went to the Nation of Islam. I played the first Kwanzaa they had with Stokely Carmichael and down in San Diego with Imam Barak. I was with a lot of different organizations. I was jumping in and out, when you get in one and then you can't be that, and then you go to another one, and then, oh yeah, and even, when I tried a little while, I say about 6 months, I was with the Nation of Islam. But I couldn't fix the fact that they didn't really believe in Jesus, but I think it's the thought that what each group was advocating for as something that they wanted, they felt that would be the sustainable deterrent that would go on against racism and against the evils that were being perpetuated. So they felt like once they got what they asked for, that would continue to deter it, and it didn't.
Thank you. You can pass that, right? Thank you. And so a few different things that I heard in that conversation was, one, something that Jania spoke on was a lack of focus, right? A lack of togetherness even in the movement on the side of those who are asking other people, So definitely, needing unity, but also underneath that, I hear scarcity. A belief in scarcity was definitely one of the failures. And thinking that there wasn't enough for everybody, right? And so, and that everyone had to be a monolith, and it's okay. We're gonna believe different things. We're gonna have a preference for apples rather than oranges, if you will. And so definitely that idea of scarcity and that there's not enough to go around and a lack of unity was in there. So let me do a little more poetic storytelling. And definitely we want to be just in our living room a little bit, even though I'm up here, you know what I mean? If you want to go get a cup of tea, go ahead and go to the back, get a cup of tea. You know what I mean? Let's be just with each other as we're having this conversation. So, question. I like questions. The reason I like questions is because it means I'm open for an answer. I truly can't have a real question unless the answer is there. right? There are a lot of non-questions that people ask. It's like, that's not a real question. What do you really want to know? All right, question. Am I a statistic to you? Like Black Lives Matter when it's time for your equal rights? Am I a promotion for you? Like cool monkeys in the jungle, or wipe my beautiful brown clean by fading to white? Do you see me as part of your community, or a commodity, or an oddity or comedy? Does my life hold meaning in your eyes? Does the meaning of my thighs hold the same value as your life? Is there a target on my back, or my head, or my bed that suggests I exist as your sport? You would have me on couches crying out, "Me too," for a chance to be in your play as strange fruit. Do I register in your mind as beautiful, valuable, intellectual, or capable? Or my cultural artifacts simply the spoils of your war? Like obelisks honoring Louis XV, or Sekhmet in the Louvre. You wear my culture as nothing more than a moose head above your mantle. Is my neighborhood not sacred? Don't I deserve to be represented? How do you see me? Does it matter if I have clean food to eat? Whether I have decent, relevant, modern, and historical books to read? Clean streets, parks, or a beach? What about a library? Does that meet with how you see my needs? What about music in my schools, or gymnasiums and recreation? What about banks that back me, or businesses that promote me, and investments that support me? What about statues that honor me? Or, at the very least, don't celebrate the defeat of those who look like me? How do you see me? Is that really your responsibility? Question. All right. To talk a little bit about what I had on my list of the failures of the civil rights movement. Number one, how we see ourselves. Who do we say we are is the major failure of the civil rights movement. Anyone seeing themselves as less than the life of the Creator, whatever name you want to call it, you did not create yourself. So something created you, something brought you here. And if you see yourself as anything less than the life of the Creator, you are seeing yourself as less than, and are already stepping out on a false premise, right? First major failure. Second, Black people supporting Black institutions. A few people touched on that one, right? So before the civil rights movement, and this is going to go into the next one too, excellence in our schools and institutions. So before the civil rights movement, the best teachers in the Black community were teaching Black kids. The best doctors were servicing Black folks. The best of everything was in-house. But once integration hit, all of that was spread out and hired out by other communities that now have the best of the Black community, right? And that in itself is not a problem. The problem was then that Black folks no longer had access to that excellence, right? Because they were still trying to be like somebody else, because because they still didn't see themselves as an emanation of the Creator. Right? So it's all going to go back to that. You know, because no one can oppress you unless you see yourself as being capable of oppression. And that's a mouthful that we can break down later. No one can oppress you unless you see yourself as capable of being oppressed. Right? And so because we didn't have the unity that someone spoke on, because we didn't have focus, our community was able to be scattered. And we no longer had access to our own excellence, if you will. All right, one more point. The impact on the Black family. Right? If you don't have a community to hold you, it really does take a village to raise a child. Individuals cannot raise healthy children by themselves. And so what do we see as the commonality across the Black community? Right? A lot of dis-ease. A lot of unhealthy mental, physical, spiritual, social, financial realities. I wouldn't even say as a collective that we're thriving creatively. Because a lot of the creativity of the Black community gets pimped out. Right? Sold to the highest bidder, and hey, you want me to get up there and look like a buffoon? I'll do that for $1 million, cool. Rather than something that educates, rather than something that draws out, rather than something that speaks to your soul, calls forth your walk, right? Because that's the true purpose of entertainment, is to touch your soul. And we definitely need to get back there. So, that's what, for me, are the top 4 failures of the Civil Rights Movement. And we get to do something about that. We get to do something about that. By seeing ourselves as whole, by seeing ourselves as who we are. And so I'm going to pass these handouts out. If you could just give some to the people in the row and then let it pass it down. And so in here, we're going to see some tools that are useful in looking at this information, looking at how we play a part in that being a reality. How do we, living our lives, play a part in that reality? And you can, leave them on the chair. If you didn't get one, just raise your hand. All right, and so the community is simply made up of families and individuals. And so that's where we need to start, with ourselves. Where are we? How are we living? What are we giving? Who do we say we are? You know what I mean? And so before we jump into the handout, I'm going to do another poetic storytelling that takes us through the process that is on that handout, if you will. I'm going to use my life, and I'm going to walk through some assessment. I'm going to walk through some forgiveness. I'm going to walk through some acceptance, and some contribution, and some support, and some commitment. This piece is called Spread Your Wings. Actually, I'm going to do a different one. I feel this one calling. This one is called Ride or Rise. And so I invite you to think about the metaphor of water and waves and tides, and how the power of the tide really lays in our ability to either ride it or to rise up on it. When we ride it, we stay right there at the level of the tide, right? And it can take us out. But when we rise up on it, we can ride it on top, and we use it to elevate. And so think of memories like a tide, if you will. Your memories can take you out, or they can lift you up. All right? It is up to us whether we stay at the level of the memory or if we rise above the memory. I might need some spectacles for this one. I invite you to take a journey with me. Maybe you can't hear me if I start out saying, roses are red and violets are blue. You need to see some of what I have been through in order for me to connect with you. So let's take a walk down memory lane. I'll recall the shame and disdain that I felt for life and how stuff just simply wasn't right. But I'm not gonna go too deep. When you dig that trench, you really have to watch your own feet. But that's all right. I'm gonna lay a bridge over here to the side for us to rise when the time is right. But for now, let's go ahead and ride on this tide. If I go back far enough in my memories, I reach a wall behind which everything appears to be hollow. It seems to me it just might be that I built this wall to protect us all from the guilt and the shame, from the repercussions of blame, from the retribution too gritty to name. You see, pain shows many favorites, but honors no sense of privilege. It is doled out equally to the rich and those struck with poverty. Honestly, I think some of the rich have more pain to deal with, thinking that money would heal all that itch. But in reality, it just dug a deeper ditch. Go back to my itch. We're still riding. Somewhere along the way, my heart grew hard, calloused by my battle scars, accompanied by my fascination with causing lacerations. A fist to the lip and that jaw got split. I actually enjoyed the sport of it, but alone at night was horrific. The guilt from causing unwarranted bedlam, the mayhem was amazing, and anarchy was rewarded in a system that was jaded by the reality of racist cases that saw no true faces, just a black power movement trying to offset the boot on our neck. Am I getting too deep in it? Is it time for that bridge yet? A little further before we rise. Getting close to me was truly an act of bravery. I didn't know anything about intimacy or relating. All I knew was debating and shaming. I could break your argument down to the tiniest morsel and feed it back to you dehumanizingly forceful. And that really worked well until it came time to want another life. Until it came time to want people by my side, not under my pride. Remember that bridge I laid by on the other side? Let's go ahead and rise on this tide. The decision to release the pain left me in position to offer true gain. Once I decided to cast my vote and use my life to offer others hope, my tides began to lift me, and everyone else with me. My intuitive knowing spoke. There has to be another way. Life was not meant for all this pain. That's when I began to master the watery plains and rise through my rising tides. Life was simply waiting on me to ask for space to breathe. When I didn't think I had a choice, when I didn't know I had a voice, I simply went along with whatever was dealt to me, which left no room to breathe. Now that I have a legacy through my artistry and my ability to speak, I can ride or rise on my rising tides. So what are you gonna do? Ride or rise? Because your tides are rising too. That's that piece. And so I invite you to take a look at that handout. And that's for you to take home and to take a look at some of the things that it's talking about, right? There's some questions, of course, as I said, a lot of questions, you know, that are to really service us, you know, to service you, anybody who's in your charge, to really go deeper, you know, in life. And really look at your life as a garden, right? If you're saying, ooh, I want apples, but you keep planting oranges, it's time to stop planting the oranges. You know what I mean? If you say you want peace, but you're sowing deception and hate, it's time to just quit sowing those, right? If you say you want community, but you're not building, you're not meeting new people, right? It's time to look at what seeds are you sowing in your life, right? And if you're servicing other people, walk them through a process of really beginning to look at what seeds are they sowing in their life. And so I really invite you all to do an assessment on your life and then move into that number 2. After you do that assessment, really look at forgiveness work. A lot of people have a misconception about what it means to forgive. You know, thinking that you're giving something away to somebody else who has wronged you. But forgiveness is really letting go. That's what forgiveness is, the process of letting go. And there's really the only one person, well, we're gonna get deep, one person to forgive, right? And that's ourselves. The guilt we hold, the shame we hold, the thoughts we hold of ourselves as less than what we are, right? So then, after you look at that forgiveness work, you're gonna move into that acceptance work, right? What are you accepting in your life? And are you accepting those things that really hold you in the truth of who you are? And then you're gonna look at what do you have to give? Because you can't receive what you're unwilling to give. So we're gonna take a deep look at what we have to give. And then our support systems. This is key. You gotta do an assessment on your support systems. Sometimes a support system is a person, sometimes it's a place, sometimes it's music. Right? What are those things that can support you in moving forward in the direction that you want to go? When you sit down and listen deeply from a place of knowing who you are. And then after that, what are you willing to commit to do differently right now? Not about in the future, about right now. What can you do differently? Whether it's what story you've been telling yourself that you need to knock off, or what do you need to add to the story you've been telling yourself, or if there's different people you need to hang out with, you know what I mean? Or some people you need to let go of, go on, forgive them, let them go, you know what I mean? But I guarantee they'll show back up if you don't do your work, right? And I'm sure everybody in this room has been like, you remind me of. This keeps showing up, right? Because we're the common denominator in all the people that we attract to our space, right? So, I invite you to take that and really apply it. You know what I mean? I am going to read one last poetic storytelling, and then I'm going to open up for Q&A. And this last one, I thought I was going to read before, but I'm reading now. It lets you in a little bit to my journey. This one is called Spread Your Wings, My Little Butterfly. This one's funny a little bit. Woo, funny, not funny. Some of y'all are gonna be like, ooh, really? Here we go, let's get it. Growing up, my fantasies ranged from being like Annie and getting adopted by some rich white family to living like the Cosbys and to being the black Muslim Godfather family. You see, Don Corleone was a hero in hood sight. So spread your wings, my little butterfly. Our financial means were below me. There was a whole lot of wanting and haunting and very little rewarding. It was low-key traumatizing. You see, I grew up in my own isolated village. There were 9 of us. And then there were 8. I never understood why my mom had to leave and why I had so much anxiety. Despite what they say, it is unnatural for a child to lead. Spread your wings, my little butterfly. My father was everything to me. We went grocery shopping, restaurant hopping, and when I won the best report card, I got whatever I wanted. With my older brothers, I went ninja knocking. Ooh, they were such a bad influence on me. My older sister, well, she did my hair sometimes. My younger brother and sister received the majority of my care. And all the while, I walked around scared. But I didn't know it. You see, I used anger as my cloak and as a means to cope and to blow smoke. My bark was just as strong as my bite, but my heart wasn't right. Living in constant fright leaves no room for an inspiring life. Spread your wings, my little butterfly. Back to the furthest reaches of my memory, I desire to get away from the pain, away from the rain, away from the limited vision from whence I thought I came. Through a child's sight, all that can be seen is what ain't right. I somehow miss the spiritual sounding, the communal grounding, and the intellectually resounding voice of my father. Read between the lines, this life of mine is no small matter. I came here to restore the DNA of the Sirius B. Muid Hughley Johnson Venusian destiny. Spread your wings, my little butterfly. You see, I have been called to rise up beyond all that can be seen, to bring forth a legacy that speaks to your mind and stimulates your thoughts, that speaks to your heart and stimulates your walk, that speaks to your soul and inspires what you know. So, here is my family, led by a matriarchy and head by divine partnering, expressing heavenly artistry, rendering. If I leave you nothing else, I leave you myself through the eyes of Malika, Yamina, and True Wealth. While family tells what we came here to heal and what we carry worth a heavenly yield, your soul will tell what you are worth, and furthermore, the reason for your birth. So spread your wings, my little butterfly. Rest in peace. All right, so that is the conclusion of the information that I want to present to really spur this part. Because the Q&A, the open dialogue is really the heart of it. To really hear from you all, to hear what's on your mind, to hear what generated in your thoughts as I just presented what I had to give. All right? So if we could have a show of hands, who has something to share? It doesn't even have to be a question. You know what I mean? If there's just something that was generated in your mind, in your heart, through the conversation that we just took part in. So, I love it. Right. I love that.
Okay.
Yes. Own it. Walk in it.
Well, just because, the white people's Independence Day just passed. So it's just like, in Hollywood, especially out here, a lot of us are kind of caught up in, like you said, being the buffoon and like selling our souls, you know, for the glitz, the glam, the lifestyle. I was caught up in that for so many years. I've been out here over a decade. And so on 4th of July, I rewatched Roots. It's been so long since I rewatched that movie. And it broke my heart so much, and the main part that broke my heart was the black folks that were capturing, you know, Kunta Kinte and smiling. And that's just so much that you see these days. We're so gung-ho on being accepted by other races and not really looking within ourselves and believing in ourselves and seeing the power within us. But you saw, like, from the family that raised Kunta Kinte and him always wanting to escape and him believing in the power, what was embedded in them as opposed to the Americans out here. And it's just that you just touched on something. It's not a question, it's really just a statement of us really believing in ourselves and seeing, you know, the higher power within us. I guess that's better than saying superior versus inferior, even though I still believe we are superior. But I like the way that you put it. And it's just like, I just feel like, I don't know what it is that we can do for us to really all just as a collective believe in that power that we hold within ourselves. And I feel like once we really start believing in that is when we really start elevating as a collective. But, you know, living out here in Hollywood and LA, it's kind of hard to like grasp that and see that.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, and over here, I think that, you know, as long as just to touch on a couple things you said, as long as we're in that conversation of looking out here for answers, there's going to be a problem to solve, right? Because we put the problem there by looking out rather than looking within to draw out, right? And so I think the conversation of the superior and inferior, hey, it is what it is. You know what I mean? I definitely promote sovereignty for everybody. I know that everyone is a child of God. And I believe that there's enough to go around and everything has a role. Everything has something to contribute that will make this thing lift off to the fifth dimension. You know what I mean? And so, whether we believe in superiority or inferiority, or sovereignty for all, you know, is neither here nor there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So thank you for your contribution to the conversation. And thank you for, you know, being willing to jump in. You know what I mean? I like that. First to the buffet. Let's go. All right.
I wanted to thank you again. I think this is really beautiful, and these are great questions for us to ask ourselves. And I recently, like this year, started to really recognize my power in, you know, something as simple as if I want roses, to plant roses. And my example of that is wanting to have a certain experience in this life, but yet finding myself, because I started to monitor my thoughts, finding myself rehearsing a no, or rehearsing an argument, or rehearsing strife. And when I recognized the power of my imagination, I started to rehearse a yes, to rehearse harmony, just to see it, to visualize it. And within days, like from the moment I started doing that, I started to get completely different results. So I think, you know, whatever we desire, if we take the time to really imagine it, I love how you put it, plant roses, to really imagine those things coming into our experience, that is exactly what we get, you know? So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I love how you put it. It's like rehearsing the no, which is actually putting it there, right? And rehearsing the argument. I know we've all found ourselves having conversations in our head with somebody before we actually have the conversation and prepared for everything they're going to say. You know, and it's time for us to realize the power of our thought is so key because we actually energetically put that there to be in the space, whether it was really there or not. Because sometimes what they said, we didn't even hear what they said. We heard what we were saying before we got to the conversation. Right? So that is so good, rehearsing that no, and then that visioning and that imagining, because that is powerful. That is the thought.
That's planting a rose.
That is the planting, right? Seeing it before it's done. When you look at masters in every field and you ask them about their process, they see it before they actually go and do it. That's masters in every field, whether it is basketball or painting, everything. They see it and then walk it out. And so that's what we have to do, is really begin to imagine something bigger and start rehearsing the yes around that bigger life. Thank you, Jeannie.
I was going to say something, very similar. We've been practicing this technique where we kind of fast forward to the result, what we want, it's done, right? And so, we'll get excited about something we want, like, I can't wait to have this. We just go to the place where it's done and we celebrate it. Like, isn't it so great that we intended for that thing to happen and then it just happened and we met the right person and then thinking, so we're going to the place where we're excited about the thing as if it already happened. And that's been getting us quicker results that are directly in alignment with the seeds that we're planting. And it kind of gets us out of what they're not going to do for us, or blaming people, or even focusing on how it is.
Or how to fix it.
Yeah, like going to taking it quantum and just saying, you know what, it's like, and it goes back to scripture, it goes back to the Torah, the Quran, where it's like praying, believing that ye have it already. So it's like, I'm so confident in it that I'm celebrating it already. Cheers, wow, that was so great, and isn't it so wonderful that we did it? And we just go on this little rant of, of celebration around it, and then get in line.
Yes.
It's been working, like trying to catch each other. It's like, let's get where it's done.
Yes. And just two things, you bring it in the law of vibration as well as partnership, right? Where being partnered up magnifies the energy, you know what I mean? And so another principle, another law that life rests in is the law of vibration. Everything has an energy, everything holds a vibration. And in order for you to share space with anything, you gotta hold the same vibration as that you're trying to share space with. So that's the good and the bad news of it. Right? Because you're like, oh, these people are so negative. Well, guess what, honey? Right? But on the flip, if you're like, oh, these people are so brilliant. Well, guess what, honey? So are you. Right? And so I love that. The law of vibration, but also partnering up. And that's where, look at your support systems. What other partners can you invite in, right?
Yeah, I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts about, you talk about making space to breathe. And I think a lot of people, especially within the Black community, are in a rat race. They're just working, they're trying to, pay bills, they're just trying to just take it day by day. And so when we look at how to really elevate as a collective, or elevate even